The plasma stream ripped the sky in half, turning the night-green jungle of Xylos into a fractured canvas of white fire. Kale's stolen C-class shuttle, a repurposed courier vessel never meant for atmospheric combat, screamed as its stabilizers failed. He gripped the controls, his knuckles white, the alarms a single deafening shriek that barely cut through the fog of his pain. A jagged piece of bulkhead, snapped loose by the last energy bolt, was embedded 2 inches deep in his left side. Blood, dark and human, slicked the pilot's chair. "Just a little further," he hissed through gritted teeth, his voice a dry rasp. He was aiming for the deep ravine system he had glimpsed on the approach scans, a place thick enough with magnetic interference to blur his entry signature. But the ship was dying too fast. The jungle canopy rushed up to meet him, a sea of colossal pulsing flora that looked ready to devour the metal carcass. He fought the stick, pulling the nose up for a belly-flop landing, a controlled crash. It was the only move left. The impact was a symphony of destruction. Metal tore, groaned, and snapped. Kale's head slammed against the console, and the world dissolved into a blinding star-speckled darkness. He came to, choking on smoke. The silence that followed the crash was worse than the noise. It was the silence of a grave, broken only by the drip of his own blood and the alien chirps of the jungle. He was alive, he was wounded, and he was hiding. The bounty hunters in the orbital tracker, the ones who had shot him down, would be scanning for the wreckage. Kyle unbuckled, his body screaming in protest. The air that flooded the cabin was thick, humid, and smelled of ozone and damp soil. He grabbed his blaster, a near-empty medkit, and the data slate containing the information that had made him the most wanted man in 5 systems. He forced the emergency hatch. It popped open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a world of towering bioluminescent trees. He half fell, half climbed out of the smoking ruin, landing on moss-covered roots thick as a man's torso. The wound in his side was a hot, tearing fire. He pressed a rapid seal bandage from the kit against it. It would hold for an hour, maybe 2. He needed to move, to put distance between himself and the shuttle before the hunter's descent team arrived. Disoriented, his vision swimming, the ex-soldier pushed himself into the glowing foliage. Every step was an agony, but the battlefield instincts, drilled into him over a decade of pointless war, took over. Find cover, find water to erase the trail. He was a ghost again, a bleeding phantom in a hostile world. 20 clicks north of the crash site, the Royal Sonari convoy cut a sterile, silent path through the same jungle. It was not a path, but a repulsor field, a 10-meter-wide corridor of displaced energy that kept the forest floor and its inhabitants at a precise, respectful distance. Inside the lead diplomatic skimmer, Princess Aranaya, youngest daughter of the Empress Virel, felt like she was suffocating. The air was temperature-controlled, the light synthetically balanced. Her handmaidens sat opposite, their postures perfect, their faces serene masks. Outside, Xylos was alive, a riot of untamed psychic energy that beat against the skimmer's hull like a trapped bird. Aranaya could feel it. She could always feel it. She was the royal family's dirty little secret. The Sonari were logical, orderly people. They excelled at politics, at war, at empire. They did not, as a rule, dabble in the chaotic, messy art of telepathy. But Aranaya did. Her gift was strong, untrained, and deeply embarrassing to her mother. This diplomatic tour of the jungle moon, a tedious inspection of a new listening post, was her punishment for a minor psychic infraction at court. She watched a 4-winged sapphire predator dive into the canopy. The convoy was moving at a prescribed, boring velocity. Her guards, 2 towering Imperial sentinels in the follow skimmer, were bored. Her handmaidens were discussing thread counts for the upcoming solstice tapestry. Aranaya waited until the skimmer passed a dense grove of colossal, iron-barked trees. She knew this route. A dry riverbed, hidden by foliage, lay just beyond it. "I require a moment," she said, her voice clear and regal. The handmaidens blinked, startled. "Your Highness, the schedule will wait. The air in here is foul." Aranaya touched the control panel. The convoy slowed, the hum of the repulsors dropping in pitch. "I will walk for a moment. Stay here." "Princess, your guards. My guards can watch from a distance. I will not be long." She overrode the door seal. It slid open and the hot, vibrant breath of Xylos washed over her. She stepped out onto the moss, her silken diplomatic robes instantly out of place. She gave her handmaidens a look that promised mild diplomatic incidents if they argued. They stayed put. She walked toward the trees, her steps light. The moment she was out of sight, she broke protocol entirely. She gathered her skirts and ran, leaping over a fallen log and sliding down the muddy bank into the riverbed. She was free. Here, she could breathe. Here, she could test her gifts. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind. She touched the nervous energy of a colony of burrowing lizards. The slow, ancient thoughts of the trees themselves, the sharp, sudden hunger of the sapphire predator she had seen earlier. She let her own psychic energy flow outward, a ripple on the vast pond of the jungle's consciousness. This was what she was meant for, not the cold, calculating whispers of the imperial palace. Kale did not know how long he had been walking. Hours. His boots were soaked. The fever was setting in, turning the alien jungle into a swirling vortex of greens and blues. The pain in his side had dulled to a heavy, throbbing ache, the kind that preceded unconsciousness. He was losing too much blood. He stumbled into a clearing, his breath catching in his chest. He needed to rest. He leaned against a rock, sliding down to a sitting position. His blaster felt impossibly heavy. He checked the charge. 3 shots left. Enough for one hunter, one for the next, and one for himself. The old soldier's pact. He was half delirious when he heard the growl. It was a low, vibrating sound that shook the damp air. Kale's head snapped up, his vision cleared, sharpened by pure adrenaline. Standing 20 yards away, its fur-covered head lowered, was a monster. He recognized the species. A Sinari war beast, a Kralik. He had seen them on the front lines, tearing through human infantry lines. This one was huge, 9 feet at the shoulder, a mass of matted fur, exposed bone plates, and 6-inch claws. Its eyes, small and black, were fixed on something behind the rock Kale was resting on. It looked half-starved, its ribs showing, its movements erratic, a rogue. Then Kale saw her. She stood frozen, 5 yards from the beast, a vision in pale blue silks. She was Sinari, but not like any he had ever seen. The soldiers he fought were armored and harsh. This female was tall, slender, with the pale lavender skin of the highborn. Her features were fine, almost sharp. Her eyes the color of a winter sky. She was beautiful, and she was about to die. She was holding one hand up, her palm facing the Kralik, her lips moving in a silent word. She seemed to be trying to calm it. Kale almost laughed. "You do not calm a Kralik," the beast charged. Aranaya's breath caught. Her psychic push, the wave of calm she had projected, had bounced off the creature's mind like it was hitting Durasteel. Its mind was a tangle of pure, red-hot rage and pain. She had misjudged. She had been too confident. Her guards were too far away. She braced for the impact. The world exploded in motion. A shadow detached itself from the rocks. A figure, filthy, bloody, and moving with impossible speed. Kyle did not have time to think. He saw the threat, and he moved. He used his last 3 shots not on the beast, but on the ground at its feet. The blaster bolts kicked up steam and molten rock, a disorienting flash bang. The Kralik, momentarily blinded, reared back with a roar. It was all the time Kale needed. He launched himself off the rock, not at the beast, but at the girl. He hit her with a full-body tackle, his shoulder connecting with her midsection. The air rushed from her lungs as they crashed to the moss-covered ground, rolling behind the cover of the rocks just as the Kralik's claws raked the air where she had been standing. "Stay down, you idiot!" Kale snarled, his voice a gravelly bark. He landed on top of her, his body shielding hers. He was heavy, and he smelled of sweat, blood, and burnt ozone. Aranaya, stunned, pushed against his chest. The Kralik roared again, enraged, and circled the rocks, looking for an angle. "My guards," Aranaya started, "are too far away." Kyle cut her off. He shoved his now useless blaster into her hands. "When it comes, hit it in the eyes. Distract it." He pulled the combat knife from his boot. It was his last resort. He was in no shape for this. The movement had torn his wound wide open. He could feel the hot blood pouring down his side. The beast charged the rock pile. It was too big to be stopped. Kyle stood, his legs shaking, the knife held low. He met the beast's charge. He did not try to stop it. He used the old battlefield tactic, the matador's trick. As the Kralik lunged, Kyle sidestepped, grabbing a handful of its matted fur and using its own momentum to pivot. He drove the knife, not into its armored hide, but up, under the jaw, aiming for the soft tissue and the carotid artery. It was a 1 in 1,000 shot, learned in a desperate skirmish on a forgotten moon. His arm screamed. The beast's momentum carried them both forward, slamming Kale against a tree. The knife was ripped from his grasp. The Kralik thrashed, a terrible gurgling sound ripping from its throat. It swiped at him, its claws catching his chest plate and sending him flying. He hit the ground hard. Blackness surged at the edges of his vision. The beast took one staggering step towards him, then another, before its legs finally gave out. It crashed to the ground, dead. Silence returned to the clearing, heavier this time. Aranaya stared, her heart hammering. He had saved her. This human, he was filthy, covered in mud and his own blood. He was angry, his face a mask of pain and fury. And he was, in a way she could not begin to understand, utterly compelling. Humans were rare in the Empire, seen as primitive, brutish. This one was, and yet. Kale pushed himself to his elbows, spitting blood. He looked at her, his eyes blazing. "What are you doing out here, trying to get yourself killed?" His anger was a shield, but she could feel the waves of pain coming off him. He was dying. "You are wounded," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. "Observant," he snapped, trying to stand. He failed, slumping back against the ground. Aranaya stood, brushing the dirt from her robes. She was a princess of the Sinari Empire. She was not accustomed to being tackled, or sworn at, or saved by primitives. She was cautious, her mind cataloging his features, his ragged uniform, the desperation in his eyes. And she was curious. "You saved my life." "Do not mention it," he grunted, pressing his hand to his side. It came away soaked in red. A comm signal chimed in her ear. Her guards. They had heard the blaster fire, the roar. "Princess, report! We are approaching your position." She had seconds to make a decision. If they found him, they would kill him. He was human, wounded, and had just assaulted a member of the royal family, even if it was to save her. "Silence your comm," she commanded him, though he had none. She walked over to him. He tensed, his hand groping for the knife that was still embedded in the dead Kralik. Do not move, she ordered, and do not speak. She bent down, grabbed his arm, and hauled him to his feet. He cried out, a raw sound of pain that he quickly stifled. Where are we going? He rasped. Somewhere they will not find you, she said. She half dragged, half carried him away from the clearing, plunging into the thickest part of the jungle, just as her sentinel guards burst through the trees. Their weapons raised, they found a dead Kralik, a discarded human blaster, and no princess. Aranaya took him to her sanctuary. It was a temple ruin, ancient and forgotten, built by a civilization that had crumbled long before the Sinari arrived. It was her secret place. Vine-covered walls, a collapsed dome open to the sky, and a central chamber with a still, clear pool. She got him there on instinct and adrenaline. He was heavier than he looked, a dead weight of muscle and armor. He was delirious, muttering about bounty hunters and a man named Eli. She laid him on a cold stone slab that had once been an altar. He was shivering, his skin pale. She tore a strip from her silk robes and pressed it against his wound. Hold this, she commanded. He weakly complied. She went to the entrance of the temple, a high archway masked by curtains of hanging moss. She pulled a small silver disc from a chain around her neck, her royal seal. She pressed it against the stone. A faint blue energy field shimmered into existence, completely obscuring the entrance. It was a diplomatic cloaking field. Low power, but enough to scramble scanners and project a high authority restricted warning to any scout who came near. It would delay them. She returned to the human. He was fading. Stay awake, she said, her voice softer now. Why? He mumbled, his eyes fluttering. You are Sinari. You should be finishing the job. I am not one of your soldiers, she replied, pulling the medkit from her own belt. It was more advanced than his. She applied a dermal regenerator and a vial of synthetic blood. The tech hissed as it sealed the wound. You saved me, she said, mostly to herself. I am in your debt. Do not want your debt, he whispered, and then he was unconscious. They spent 6 days in the temple. The first 2, he was lost in fever. Aranaya stayed by his side, cooling his head with water from the pool, forcing nutrient broth between his lips. And, against her better judgment, she touched his mind. She did not mean to. It happened when she gripped his shoulder to steady him during a violent, fever-induced tremor. Her psychic shields, already strained, flickered. His mind, raw and unguarded, flooded hers. She saw fire, a city burning, the sky thick with black smoke. She heard screaming. She felt his hands, slick with the blood of a fellow soldier trying to hold his brother's insides together, Eli. She felt the bone-deep guilt, the rage at the officers who had given the order, the self-loathing that had driven him ever since. She saw him stealing the shuttle, the data slate burning a hole in his pocket. He was not just a soldier. He was a whistleblower, a fugitive. She pulled back, gasping, as if she had been physically struck. She sat by the pool for an hour, shaking. The war, which for her had been a series of dry reports and flag-draped ceremonies, was, for him, a fresh, open wound. When he woke on the 3rd day, the fever was gone. He was weak, but his eyes were clear and full of suspicion. Where am I? A temple, Aranaya said. She was meditating by the pool, her back to him. You have been unconscious for 2 days. He sat up, hissing as his new wound pulled. He looked down, surprised to find a silvery biotech bandage where a gaping hole had been. He looked at her. You did this? You would have died. I repeat, why? She turned to face him. My name is Aranaya. I do not care what your name is. You are one of them. The ones who glassed Meridian. Her eyes narrowed. I had nothing to do with Meridian. That was my father's war, not mine. You live in the palaces built on it, he shot back, his voice rough. They argued. It was sharp and bitter. He called her people tyrants. She called his species barbaric and chaotic. He threw her ignorance in her face. She countered with his savagery. You say we are so logical, he sneered, testing his legs. Your guards would have shot me on sight for being human. That is not logic. That is fear. And you, she countered, standing. You saved me. Was that logic? Or was it the same barbaric instinct that drives you? He had no answer for that. On the fourth day, he was strong enough to stand. He paced the small ruin like a caged animal. I have to go, he said. You will not last a day, she replied. My scouts are everywhere. They are looking for me. They will find you instead. So you are a prisoner too. I am a princess. It is the same thing. The words hung in the air between them. He saw her then, not as an enemy, but as something else. He saw the loneliness that clung to her like her silk robes. He saw the isolation behind her perfect, regal poise. It was a look he recognized. He saw it in the mirror every morning. On the fifth day, they sparred. It started as a test. He lunged at her, his hand aiming for her throat, stopping just an inch short. Your training is sloppy, he said. She did not flinch. And your form is crude. Show me? She did. She taught him the fluid, precise movements of Sinari martial arts, a dance of leverage and balance. He taught her the brutal, efficient counters of human close-quarters combat. He was all power and rage. She was all grace and anticipation. She used her gift, just a little, to read the first flicker of his intent, the tensing of a muscle. He learned to clear his mind, to move on pure, unpredictable instinct. He swept her legs out from under her. She twisted as she fell, hooking his ankle and pulling him down with her. They landed in a heap on the mossy stone, his chest pressed against hers, his face inches from her own. He was breathing hard. She was perfectly still. You are fast, he panted. And you are easy to read, she whispered. The air crackled. The animosity was gone, replaced by something else, something heavy and dangerous. He pulled away, his face grim, and helped her to her feet. On the sixth night, the tension broke. They were in the temple's central atrium. The collapsed dome framed a perfect circular view of the Xylo's night. 2 moons, one silver and one a deep, shattered violet, bathed the ruins in pale light. They will find me soon, Aranaya said, her voice quiet. She was tracing the rim of the stone pool. My guards, I cannot delay them forever. What happens then? Kyle asked. He was standing in the shadows, his arms crossed. I go back to the capital, back to my cage. And me? Aranaya turned to him. I do not know. He walked out of the shadows. He was healed. The filth was gone, washed away in the temple pool. His ragged uniform was clean. The anger in his eyes was still there, but it was banked, overlaid with a weariness that matched her own. You should have let me die, he said, his voice flat. I could not. Why? He demanded, stepping closer. Was I a new pet? A curiosity? You were human, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You felt real. Everything in my life is polished. Yours was a storm. I needed to see it. He was close now, close enough to see the way the moonlight caught the silver in her lavender blue eyes. Close enough to smell the faint alien scent of her skin. He had spent the last 5 years hating her species. He had never been this close to one. He felt the strange, irresistible pull from the first day, the one he had been fighting. It was not just her beauty. It was the loneliness he had seen. It was the strength she held coiled inside her. Aranaya, he said. Her name felt strange on his tongue. She looked up at him. She was not afraid. Curious, cautious, but not afraid. His hand came up, his calloused, scarred fingers touching her cheek. Her skin was cool. He half expected a psychic jolt, a rejection. But there was only her. He leaned in. He saw her eyes flutter closed. His lips were a breath away from hers. This was madness. He was a fugitive. She was a princess. He was a human. She was a Sinari. The chasm between them was not a few feet of stone, but a galaxy of war, politics, and blood. He saw Eli's face. He saw the burning cities. He felt the shame of his past, the dirt on his hands that would never wash off. Kyle pulled away, his hand dropping as if her skin had burned him. He turned his back to her, clenching his fists. "I cannot," he grated. A single metallic chime echoed through the temple. Aranaya stiffened. A blue light projected from her comms unit, forming a three-dimensional image of the imperial crest. "Princess Aranaya," a cold, synthesized voice announced. "Your presence is required. A shuttle is en route to your location. Coordinates locked." "What is it?" Kale asked, his back still to her. "A summons," she said. Her voice was flat, all the life gone from it. "From who?" "My mother, the Empress." The crest dissolved, replaced by a text-only message, high encryption, for her eyes only. She read it. Her blood went cold. "My sister," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "My elder sister, Terrell. She has been assassinated." Kale turned. The vulnerability of the starlit atrium was gone. He was a soldier again. She was a target. "Aranaya." She looked at him, her eyes wide with a new, cold fear. This was not just a summons. This was a political vortex. Her sister, the primary heir, was dead, which meant, "You are next in line," he said, understanding it all in a flash. "I have to go," she said, her voice trembling. "I have to go home." She moved toward the exit, her mind already racing. The plots, the conspiracies, her mother's cold calculations. She stopped at the archway, her hand on the stone. She looked back at him. He was a complication she could not afford, and a secret she could not abandon. "They will hunt this moon for me," she said, her voice regaining its royal steel. "They will scour this place. You cannot be here." "I am good at hiding," he said. "Not good enough. Not from my mother's agents." She paused, making a decision. "I will protect you. I do not know how, but I promise." Kale studied her. The frightened girl was gone, replaced by a princess, a future empress. He saw the danger ahead, a tide of it pulling her back to the capital. And he knew, with a soldier's certainty, that he was at a loose end. Her protection would not be enough. He gave her a grim nod. "Go. Be the princess." She hesitated. One last look at the man who had saved her. The man she had saved. The man she had almost kissed. She turned and stepped through the shimmering blue shield of the temple entrance. Kale waited, counting to 100 in his head. He checked the biomonitor on his wrist. His wound was stable. His body was 80%. He looked around the temple one last time. He picked up his useless empty blaster. He was a ghost again. When Aranaya turned back, half hoping he would be there, half fearing it, the starlit atrium was empty. He had disappeared into the forest, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and the faint, lingering memory of a human touch. She let him go. She could not mourn him. She had a new, more dangerous game to play. She straightened her robes, reset the cold mask of her royalty, and walked toward the landing lights of the Imperial shuttle. the jungle swallowing her secrets behind her. The imperial palace in Syria was a spike of glass and steel piercing a sky of perpetual, curated twilight. It was a place of straight lines, cold light, and calculated silence. After the hot, chaotic, breathing jungle of Xylos, Aranaya felt like she had been plunged into a sterile vacuum. She had been home for less than a day, and she was already suffocating. She walked the vast, echoing hall of ascension. Her silver mourning robes felt stiff, the fabric scratching at her neck. Her footsteps were the only sound, muffled by the obsidian floor that seemed to drink the light. Courtiers and ministers, all clad in shades of gray and silver, flattened themselves against the walls as she passed. They bowed, their faces perfect masks of polite sorrow. But she could feel their minds. This was the curse of her gift. She could not shut out the low, humming frequency of their thoughts. They were not thinking of Terrell, her murdered sister. They were thinking of the succession. They were thinking that she, Aranaya, was too young, too soft, too empathetic. Her sister Terrell had been the steel. She was strong, logical, and politically ruthless, the perfect heir to their mother's cold empire. Aranaya was the silk, the artist, the dreamer who preferred the wilderness to the court. Now, the silk was being asked to hold back a storm. She reached the doors to the Empress's solar. The 2 imperial sentinels guarding it did not move. They were 7-foot statues of polished chrome and plasma. They simply stared through her. The doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a room that was more void than chamber. Her mother, Empress Virel, stood before a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the capital, the city, a web of light and flying vehicles, spread out below them, a perfect orderly machine. Virel, like her city, was perfect and orderly. She wore the austere black of full mourning, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull the skin taut across her sharp cheekbones. "You are late," Virel said, not turning. Her voice was like the room, cold and empty. "The shuttle was delayed by the security protocols." Aranaya said, "Your mourning period is sufficient. 3 days. It is concluded." Aranaya felt a cold spark of anger. "Terrell is dead. She was my sister. She was your daughter. Do you feel nothing?" Virel finally turned. Her eyes were the same winter sky blue as Aranaya's. But where Aranaya's held storms, Virel's held only ice. "My feelings are irrelevant to the stability of the Sinari Empire. Your sister's death has created a power vacuum. The galaxy abhors a vacuum. Your empathy, Aranaya, is a luxury we can no longer afford." "It is not a luxury. It is what makes us sentient." "It is a weakness," Virel snapped. "One you will learn to control. You are now the sole heir to the throne. The court is unsettled. The outer territories are testing our borders. They see your weakness. Then let me show them strength. Let me lead the investigation. Let me find who did this to Terrell." "The investigation is closed," Virel said, her voice final. "It was a tragic engine malfunction. The report is sealed. It was not, I know it was not. It is what the official record states." Virel walked to her desk, a single slab of black floating stone. She touched a control. "You will stabilize the court. You will do your duty. You will be betrothed." The air left Aranaya's lungs. "Betrothed? To whom? I am in mourning." "You are an heir in crisis, Lord Dareth. The arrangement is made." Aranaya's blood ran cold. Dareth, the head of the most ambitious, power-hungry family on Sierra. A man who looked at the galaxy as something to be consumed. He was twice her age, with hard, calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. "No," Aranaya whispered, "he is cold. He is cruel. He is useful, Virel corrected. His family controls the Imperial shipyards. They are hardliners who resent the peace treaty with Earth. This alliance will placate their faction and secure the fleet. It will end the questions about your fitness to rule. The announcement will be made in 5 days, at the formal rite of succession. You are selling me. I am saving an empire, Virel said, turning back to the window. Your personal feelings do not factor into the equation. You are dismissed. Go, and try to look like a future empress, not a lost child. Aranaya stood there for a full minute, her hands clenched so tightly her nails bit into her lavender palms. She was trapped. She thought of Dareth's possessive stare. And then, unbidden, a different image flooded her mind, a filthy, bleeding human, his eyes blazing with a defiant fire, his body shielding hers from a monster. A man who was all raw instinct and painful honesty. Kyle. The memory of him, of the raw, untamed life in the jungle, was a stark contrast to this sterile, political tomb. She was torn between her crushing new duty and the memory of the broken man who had, for a few days, made her feel free. She would not marry Dareth. She would not. Kale woke up to the smell of rust and despair. His head was pounding, his mouth full of cotton. A low, vibrating hum resonated in his bones. He was in a cage, a small, filthy cage stacked on top of other cages in a cavernous, dimly lit cargo hold. He tried to move, but his muscles felt like water. Drugs. He was full of docility chemicals. How had he gotten here? He clawed at his memory. The jungle. Aranaya leaving. He had moved fast, south toward the equator, away from the Imperial search grid. He was a ghost, living off the land. But he had been too confident. He had raided a small automated Sinari depot for supplies, looking for a long-range transmitter. He triggered a silent alarm. It was not her mother's agents who found him. It was worse. A slaver crew, bottom feeders who monitored Imperial frequencies for stray signals, had landed their rust bucket ship on top of him. He had fought. He had taken down 2 of them before a high-yield neurotoxin dart hit him in the neck. Blackness. Now. He was here. The hold was filled with other sentients, a 4-armed Fellini from Altair, a pair of reptilian Zytecs. All of them looked as broken and drugged as he felt. The ship's engines eventually whined down. The cargo bay doors opened, flooding the hold with a reddish, smoke-filled light. They were on a space station, or a moon base. The air was hot and smelled of sulfur and ozone. They were dragged out, hosed down with cold, chemical-smelling water, and shoved into a line. A pit boss with a metallic jaw and a shock prod walked the line, inspecting them. Junk, the boss grumbled, prodding Fellini, who hissed weakly. More junk. What is this? He stopped at Kale. He grabbed Kale's hair, yanking his head back. A human, the slaver who had captured him said, his voice oily. A prime specimen, a veteran, judging by the scars. From the Meridian campaign, we think. The pit boss's eyes lit up. A human? A real, earthborn human? We have not had one of those in years. The crowds will pay a fortune. The hate matches are the most popular. He shoved Kyle toward a separate platform. Sold to the Gehenna pits. Kyle was drugged again, branded on his shoulder with a glowing rune, and thrown into a transport. He woke up in the last place a living soul would ever want to be. Gehenna, a rusted, war-torn moon orbiting a dying red star. It was a place of exile, a gladiator arena the size of a city, where the dregs of the galaxy were sent to fight and die for the entertainment of a bloodthirsty intergalactic audience. Aranaya could not sleep. Her new chambers were grand, a suite of rooms that had once belonged to Terrell. They felt cold, haunted. She was not fitting her ceremonial robes. She was not studying the succession protocols. She was at her data slate, her fingers flying across the holographic keys. If her mother had sealed the official investigation, she would start her own, her most loyal handmaiden. Ilara stood watch by the door. Ilara was small, quiet, and had been with Aranaya since childhood. She was also the best data slicer in the palace. "The official report is a ghost, Your Highness," Ilara whispered. "The data has been scrubbed, every file, every sensor log. It's all corrupted." "Scrubbed data is a form of data," Aranaya said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "It tells you where to look." She was using her royal access, pulling security footage from the space lanes around Syra, cross-referencing them with the second of her sister's engine failure. "There," Aranaya said, her voice sharp. She isolated a single frame. A sensor flicker from an asteroid mining platform. It caught a reflection. A ship, venting plasma, less than a kilometer from Terrell's shuttle, 1 second before the explosion. "A fighter?" Ilara asked. "No, a private yacht, modified. Run the ship's energy signature." Ilara's fingers danced. The system processed. A match came up. "Highness, the signature. It is registered to a holding company. That company is a subsidiary of House Dareth." Aranaya sat back, the air chilling around her. Dareth. He had not just been ambitious, he had been murderous, he had killed Terrell. Why? The pieces clicked into place with horrifying, cold logic. Terrell was a moderate. She supported the peace treaty with Earth. Dareth's faction were hardliners. They wanted war, for profit and for pride. They saw the treaty as a stain on the Empire. They killed Terrell, the strong heir. That left Aranaya, the weak heir. A weak heir who could be controlled. A weak heir who could be forced into marriage, giving Dareth, the assassin, a direct and legal path to the throne. It was a coup, wrapped in a funeral and a wedding. She felt sick. Her mother was either a fool or a participant. Neither option was good. She had to know more. She had to know what came next. There was one place, a place forbidden to the royal line for 100 years, ever since her ancestor declared that logic, not prophecy, would rule the Empire. She disguised herself in a simple gray cloak and, with Ilara's help, descended into the sub-levels of the palace. She went down, past the power conduits, past the water treatment systems, until she reached the foundation of the capital itself. She stood before a vast, humming core of blue light. This was the Logos, the Oracle Tech AI, an ancient sentient data core that ran the city and, some said, dreamed of the future. "Logos," she said, her voice echoing in the cold, cavernous chamber. "I seek guidance." A voice, like 1,000 wind chimes, filled the air. "The royal line is forbidden. The pact is broken." "The pact is irrelevant," Aranaya said, stepping closer. "The Empire is in danger. My sister is dead. My throne is threatened. Show me the path." The light in the core pulsed. "The path is fractured. The air is broken. The shadow of war returns." "Dareth," Aranaya said. "Is he the shadow?" "He is a shadow, a tool of a greater darkness. The war faction. They seek to break the Earth Treaty. They seek the humans' homeworld." "How do I stop him?" "The marriage." "Marriage is a false light," the AI chimed. "It leads only to your annihilation and the galaxy's fire." "Then what do I do?" she cried, her desperation echoing in the chamber. "What is the key?" The AI was silent for a moment. The light pulsed faster. "You have already touched the key. The vector is not here. It is lost. The ghost from the jungle. The bleeding one." Aranaya's heart stopped. Kyle. The human. He is not a memory. He is a pivot. The bleeding one you have touched carries your future. Find him, or all futures collapse. The air in the arena was a solid thing, thick with the stench of blood, sweat, and cheap alcohol. Kyle stood in the center of the rust-colored sand, his breath tearing in his lungs. His opponent, a four-armed, tusked brute from the Zytek system, lay in a heap, its neck broken. The multi-species crowd roared. They were screaming his new name. Human Kale! Human Kale! It had been weeks, or months. Time was measured in fights. The first fight, he had been weak, the drugs still thick in his system. He had been beaten, broken, and almost killed. He was on his back, the sand in his mouth, the brute's club about to come down. And then, he remembered, the smell of ozone and burning plasma. A trench on Meridian, his brother, Eli, just 18 years old, clutching his guts. It is okay, Kyle, we will make it. Just stop the bleeding. But he could not stop the bleeding. That memory, that failure, had triggered something. The soldier, buried under years of guilt and weeks of narcotics, had clawed its way to the surface. He had exploded. He had not just won the fight. He had eviscerated his opponent. He fought again, and again. Each battle, he let the drugs and the weakness burn away, replaced by pure, focused rage. He was not just fighting for survival. He was fighting to remember. He was honing his instincts. He was the champion of the Gehenna pits, a human monster loved by the baying crowds. He was a slave, but he was no longer weak. He was in the communal cell, cleaning a gash on his arm, when the guards threw a new prisoner in. The figure was small, wrapped in a scavenger's rags, and masked. New meat, one of the guards sneered. Try not to let human Kale eat this one before the prelims. They laughed and slammed the door. Kyle ignored the newcomer. He finished stitching his arm. You fight like a human, a quiet female voice said. But you move like a ghost. Kale was on his feet in an instant. The sharpened piece of metal he used as a needle pressed against the newcomer's throat. Who are you? The figure slowly raised her hands. The one in the jungle. The one you saved. She sent it to me. Kale froze. He ripped the mask and hood away. It was a Sinari female, not Aranaya. This one was younger, her features plainer, her eyes wide but determined. The princess, Kale snarled, pressing the blade harder. She sent you to kill me. Clean up the loose end? No, the woman said, her voice trembling but her eyes steady. My name is Ilara. I am her handmaiden. She sent me to save you. She needs you. Ilara. The handmaiden who had stood by the door. He let her go, shoving her back. She is a princess. She has armies. Why would she need me? Because you are the only one she can trust. Ilara pulled a small silver device from her boot. She is in danger. They are forcing her into a marriage with Lord Dareth, the man who murdered her sister. It is a coup. She is trying to stop it. But she is alone. Ilara's mission had been simple. Aranaya had gathered her loyal handmaidens. Find the human, she had commanded in secret against royal decree. The oracle says he is the key. Ilara had used Aranaya's private funds, slicing through data nets, tracking rumors of a human fighter. It had taken her weeks, but she had found him. She needs a soldier. Kale, Ilara said, not a politician. She needs the bleeding one. Kale stared at her. He had been living in hate. Hate for the Sinari who had killed his brother. Hate for the slavers who had caged him. I hate myself. Now a memory, a promise from a girl with winter sky eyes had reached into the deepest pit in the galaxy to pull him out. How? he asked, his voice a low growl. Ilara smiled. She held up the silver device, a high-frequency scrambler. The guard's comms and the cell camera are on a 5-minute loop. We have a maintenance chute at the end of this hall. It leads to the lowest docking bay. A freighter is waiting. And the guards? That, Ilara said, pulling 2 plasma pistols from her cloak, is where you come in. They moved. The alarm sounded almost immediately. The chute was a trap, or the loop was shorter than she thought. It did not matter. The corridor erupted in chaos. 2 guards became 4, then 10. Ilara was fast, precise, a trained agent hidden beneath a handmaiden's robes. She moved, firing in short, controlled bursts. But Kale was a veteran. He was a storm. He moved without thinking, his body a weapon, his mind clear. He disarmed, he broke, he killed. He was the human Kale the crowds had paid to see. Together, they were a whirlwind of destruction, cutting a path through the station's security. They reached the docking bay. A small, ugly freighter sat on a dark landing pad. The ramp was down. "Ugo!" Kyle yelled, providing cover fire as Ilara sprinted for the cockpit. He took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, the same one he had just stitched. The pain was blinding, but he welcomed it. It made him reel. He dove into the ship just as the ramp sealed. Moments later, the freighter blasted out of the hangar, scraping the wall and dodging automated cannon fire. Ilara was a frantic but skilled pilot. She slammed the lever for the lightspeed drive. The rusted moon of Gehenna disappeared. The stars stretched into streaks of blue and white. Kyle was in the co-pilot's chair, pressing a med seal against his burning shoulder. He was bleeding again, but he was free. "She knew you were in danger," Ilara said, her knuckles white on the controls. "She felt it." "Set a course for the capital," Kyle said, his voice a low growl. He looked at the hyperspace streaks rushing past. "I've had enough of running." The rite of succession was a sequence of trials, and Aranaya was failing them by refusing to participate. Each day she delayed. The whispers in the cold, glass corridors of the palace grew louder. She feigned illness. She cited ritual impurities. She used every hollow, archaic excuse in the imperial protocol books to avoid the public displays of logic, combat, and political theory. The court saw it as a weakness. Her mother, Empress Virel, saw it as defiance. Only Aranaya knew it was a desperate, panicked, stalling action. Lord Dareth, however, saw it as an opportunity. He found her in the Southern Observatory, a room she had always loved for its view of the Violet Nebula. Now, it just felt like a larger cage. "Your Highness," Dareth said, his voice a smooth, deep purr that always set her teeth on edge. He bowed, but it was the bow of a predator, all confidence and barely concealed power. "You look pale. The stress of your recent elevation is clearly taking its toll." He stepped beside her, too close, his expensive robes brushing her arm. He smelled of exotic spices and cold ambition. "Allow me to help carry the burden. A wedding, a union of our houses, would stabilize the court overnight. You would not have to face the trials alone." He was trying to seduce her, his words a venomous honey. When she turned away, his tone hardened, the seduction replaced by a razor's edge. "You cannot delay forever. Aranaya," he said, his voice dropping. "The law is clear. If the heir refuses the trials, the next in line may challenge. And since your sister's accident, the next in line is a council, one that I happen to lead. Do not mistake your mother's patience for weakness. Marry me, and you will be an empress. Defy me, and you will be a footnote." He left her there, his threat hanging in the air like poison. She gripped the observatory rail, her knuckles white, but the true threat was not Dareth. It was inside her. The psychic echo of Kale was no longer a memory. It was an infection. It had started as flashes of the jungle, the scent of ozone in his blood. But now, it was a constant low-frequency hum of rage and pain at the edge of her consciousness. It was his rage, his pain, bleeding into her. When Dareth had touched her arm, she had felt a sudden blinding flash of a plasma bolt hitting her shoulder, a pain so real she had almost cried out. When a courtier offered her a drink, she felt the phantom sensation of rust and despair in her mouth. She was losing her grip, her control. The one thing Sinari prized above all was fracturing. The emotional repression of her court life was colliding with the raw, unfiltered humanity he had left imprinted on her mind. She was becoming psychically unstable, and the more she tried to fight it, the worse it became. The palace lights seemed to flicker when she was angry. A priceless glass vase had shattered across the room when Dareth's proposal had, for a second, made her feel a surge of pure, undiluted, and very human terror. Kale arrived on Sierra not as a soldier, but as cargo. Ilara's freighter was a smuggling vessel, and they were deposited into the capital's underbelly, a maze of steam-filled tunnels and maintenance shafts 3 levels below the pristine surface. The air was thick, hot, and smelled of industrial chemicals and unrecycled waste. This was the city's gut, the place the glittering spires pretended did not exist. Ilara guided him, her movements precise. She had been born in these tunnels, a child of the palace's vast invisible servant class before Aranaya had chosen her. This was her territory. "The rebels are not a formal army," Ilara whispered, as they navigated a narrow catwalk above a river of wastewater. "They are the unseen, the ones the Empire has forgotten." They met in a decommissioned generator room. The rebels were a mix of species, all of them bearing the mark of the lower levels, weary eyes, patched clothing, and a deep, simmering resentment. Their leader was a scarred Sinari named Malix, who had been a palace guard before he was crippled in a riot and cast aside. Malix looked Kale over, his eyes lingering on the human's ragged clothing and the fresh plasma burn on his shoulder. "Ilara brings us a pet," Malix sneered. "A human. The ones who lost the war. Why is he here?" "He's here on the princess's behalf," Ilara said, her voice sharp and commanding. "The princess," Malix spat. "She is the same as her mother. She hides in her tower while Dareth prepares to crown himself and turn the city into a new shipyard for his war." "She is trying to stop him," Ilara insisted. "With him?" Malix pointed at Kyle. "He looks half dead." "I am alive enough," Kale said, his voice a low growl. The pain in his shoulder was a hot, steady throb. "You hate Dareth. I hate him more. You hate the Empire. I have my own reasons. You want to stop a war. I just want to finish one." Malix saw the killer in him then, the gladiator from Gehenna. "We are planning a supply raid," Malix said, testing him. "Dareth's personal security force has a holding area in this sector. They process dissidents. We hit it, get medical supplies, and free the prisoners." "I am in," Kale said. The holding area was a sterile, white-tiled block, a small piece of the upper world's cold logic inserted into the chaos of the undercity. The raid was a disaster. It was a trap. Dareth's security forces, black-armored and brutal, were waiting. The rebels were pinned down in a crossfire. Kyle, reverting to the pure tactical instinct of the battlefield, saw the pattern. He broke from cover, drew their fire, and used the rebels' panicked retreat as a diversion to flank the security squad. He moved like a ghost, the way Aranaya had said. He was a storm of brutal efficiency. He finished the fight in 30 seconds, and then he saw what they were guarding. The dissidents were not Sinari. They were in a separate, shielded cage. They were families, men, women, and a few terrified children, all with the same blended features, pale skin like the Sinari, but their eyes were round. Their hair was black, or brown, or red. They were half human. A guard, wounded and crawling, spat at them. Hybrids, filth, not worth the air. Cale's blood went cold. This was not just political oppression. This was a quiet, systematic cleansing. The Sinari Empire, so logical and pure, was enslaving the children it had bred from its human conquests. He used his blaster to break the cage lock. "Go," he ordered them, his voice thick. "Go with Malix. Get out." A young woman, clutching a child, paused. She looked at Kyle, at his human face. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her human eyes. That night, Malix treated Kale not as a pet, but as a brother. "We learned of the camps only recently," Malix said, his voice grim. "Dareth's faction believes they are impure. They are rounding them up, sending them to off-world labor colonies. This is what he is building his new empire on. Blood and slaves." Kale's fury was a cold, hard stone in his gut. He was angry at Dareth, but a part of him was angry at Aranaya, too. She was a part of this system. She lived in a palace built on this cruelty. A coded message found him 2 days later. It was not from Ilara. It was a flicker on a public data terminal, a sequence of numbers that matched the serial number of the knife he had used on the Kralik. A message from the Logos. It was a map, a trail of maintenance junctions leading from the Undercity into the palace foundations. It ended at a single, unmarked chamber. He went alone. He followed the map through ancient, dust-filled passages, far below the sublevels Aranaya had visited. He found a small, circular room, a forgotten data conduit from a pre-imperial age. And in the center, a single active terminal. It was waiting for him. The Logos did not speak to him in chimes. It simply unlocked the file. He plugged in his stolen data slate. The file transferred. He stood in the darkness of that forgotten room and watched the unscrubbed truth of Terrell's assassination. He saw the comm log from Dareth's yacht. He heard the order in Dareth's own voice. "The primary heir is too sympathetic. She will not support the expansion. Remove her. The secondary heir is weak. She will be controlled." He heard the scream as Terrell's shuttle was hit. He saw the cold, efficient report. "Target eliminated." This was the proof. The weapon Aranaya needed. He was ragged, covered in the grime of the Undercity, his shoulder wound weeping. And he was furious. He would deliver this message himself. The Garden Tower was Aranaya's last sanctuary. It was the only place in the palace that felt alive. A dome of glass and alien flora open to the twin moons. She was there, meditating, desperately trying to calm the psychic storm inside her. When he burst through the door, he was a nightmare, a ghost from the jungle. He was covered in filth and dried blood, his face a mask of rage, his eyes burning with a righteous fire. She was on her feet in an instant, her hand flying to the small blaster hidden in her robes. Kale. He did not stop. He stalked toward her, a predator, and slammed the data slate onto the stone table between them. "I was in your sewers," he snarled. "I found your slaves, the half-breeds, the children your people are hiding in cages. Did you know? Did you, princess?" She was desperate, guarded, terrified he had been captured. Kale, you do not understand. I understand this," he roared, jabbing a finger at the slate. "I understand that your fiancé, the man you are being forced to marry, murdered your sister. And I understand that you are all just letting it happen." He activated the slate. Dareth's voice filled the tranquil garden. "Remove her. The secondary heir is weak. She will be controlled. Aranaya collapsed onto the bench, her hand over her mouth. She knew it. She had felt it. But to hear it, her weakness, her desperation, turned to ice. I knew he was responsible. I am not letting it happen. I am trying to stop it. By hiding in a garden? He shot back. While your people are rounding up children? That was the spark. The physical and emotional storm broke. You know nothing, she screamed, shoving him. It was a real physical shove, full of all her pent-up fear and rage. I am a prisoner here. I have been fighting this alone. I sent Alara for you. I risked everything to find you. He grabbed her arms. He was all wiry strength, his grip like a steel trap. You sent it to me? Or you sent for a weapon? What was I? Aranaya, a tool, a human animal you could point at your enemies? The accusation hung in the air, so full of pain and truth that it shattered her. Her fury broke, and all that was left was the desperate, lonely girl he had seen in the jungle. I sent for you, she whispered, her voice breaking, because I was scared, and I was alone, and you were the only real thing I have felt in my entire life. He stared at her. The fury in his eyes softened, just for a second, replaced by the deep, aching pain she knew so well. It was his pain, the pain she had been feeling for weeks. He let go of her arms. His hand, scarred and dirty, came up to her face. He touched the tear that was tracing a path down her lavender cheek. The alien moonlight of the twin moons, one silver, one violet, streamed through the glass dome. The garden was silent, save for their breathing. The pain was still there. The anger was still there. But underneath it all was the raw, unspoken pull that had started in the jungle. He did not lean in slowly. He did not ask. He kissed her. It was a collision. It was not a kiss of love, but of desperation, of pain, of two worlds crashing together. It was the rough scrape of his stubble against her smooth skin. It was the taste of the Undercity, of adrenaline and blood, on his lips. It was her hand, tangling in his matted hair, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to him as her world spun apart. He kissed her like he was trying to devour her, to erase the line between them. She kissed him back with all the repressed passion, all the fear, all the desperate need to feel for 1 second something other than the cold, calculating logic of her court. When they broke apart, they were both gasping. They stared at each other, the reality of what they had done settling on them like a shroud. Cale was the first to speak, his voice a raw rasp. Come with me, he begged, his forehead resting against hers. Let's go. Right now. We can take Alara's ship. We can disappear. Let this corrupt empire burn. Let it fall. She could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. It was a soldier's solution. Tactical, clean, escape. And it was so tempting. To run, to be free, to just be with him, a ghost on a forgotten moon. But she pulled back. She looked at the city lights below, the perfect, orderly machine built on a foundation of slaves and lies. She heard Dareth's voice. The secondary air is weak. No, she said. Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was steel. Aranaya! No, she repeated, stepping away from him, pulling her royal dignity around her like armor. If I run, he wins. Dareth takes the throne. He will not just let the empire burn, Kyle. He will use it. He will start the war again, for profit, for pride. He will go back to Earth. He will burn your world to the ground to prove his strength. She turned to face him, the future empress, not the lost girl. I cannot run. I will not. I must stay. I must fight for the throne. He saw the resolve in her. He saw the jungle princess, but now she was a queen. Then you will die, he said, his voice flat. They will not let you win. He killed your sister. He will kill you. Not if he is exposed. She looked at the data slate. This is the weapon, but it is not enough to show a council. I must show the Empire. A plan formed in her mind, desperate and impossibly bold. The right of succession. I will not delay it any longer. I will accept. And at the ceremony, in front of the full court and the live media feeds, I will present my case. They will kill you before you say 2 words. Not if I am not alone. She looked at him. He will present me as weak, controlled. I will present to you, a human war veteran, a living testament to the peace Dareth wants to destroy. I will introduce you as an envoy from a world he threatens, a guest under my royal protection. You are insane, Kale breathed. They will see a human and shoot me on sight. They will not, she said, her eyes blazing with a terrifying certainty. They will not dare, not if you are at my side. You are the proof. You are the pivot. The oracle was right. He wanted to argue. He wanted to drag her from the tower, but he saw the look in her eyes. It was the same look he had when he flew a stolen shuttle into enemy territory. It was the look of a soldier on a suicide mission. I will need to be cleaned up, he said. Finally, she managed a shaky smile. I have a plan for that too. She snuck him through the service passages, using Alara's knowledge and her own royal overrides. She brought him to her private chambers, her new chambers, the ones that had belonged to Terrell. She had him washed, his wounds treated with the advanced technology of the palace. She dressed him in the formal silver and black robes of a diplomatic guest. He looked uncomfortable, alien, in the clean clothes. The fire was still in his eyes, but the gladiator was hidden. The ceremony begins in 1 hour, she said. They were in the imperial antechamber, a vast hall of marble and gold that stood just outside the main throne room. I will enter first. Chamberlain will announce it to me. Then he will announce a guest of the heir. That is you. You walk to my side. You stand there. You do not speak. Let them see you. Let them see a human standing with a Cenari heir. It will be enough to shatter Dareth's narrative. He just nodded, his hand resting on the data slate hidden in his robes. His shoulder was throbbing. The new medical seal felt like it was pulling his skin too tight. He was running on pure adrenaline. He had not slept in 3 days. The doors to the throne room were 30 feet high. The Chamberlain, a wizened Cenari in heavy robes, looked at Kale with open disdain but said nothing. It was not his place to question the heir. Your Highness, the Chamberlain said, bowing. The court is assembled. I am ready, Aranaya said. She looked at Kale one last time. Do not flinch, she whispered. I do not know how, he replied. The grand ceremonial music began. The doors began to slide open, revealing the throne room, packed with hundreds of nobles, and the cold, waiting stare of Lord Dareth, standing near the Empress's empty throne. Aranaya took a deep breath and stepped forward. Kale waited, his cue to follow. He took 1 step, and the world tilted. The adrenaline that had held him together since the Undercity, the lack of sleep, the internal bleeding from the Gehenna fights that his new wound had aggravated, it all hit him at once. A black fog rushed his vision. The music became a distant roar. He felt a tearing pain in his side, sharp and hot. He looked down. A dark, wet stain was spreading on the silver robes. His wounds, old and new, had given way. Aranaya, he rasped, but his voice was gone. He stumbled, clutching his side. He pitched forward, crashing to the marble floor of the antechamber just as the doors opened wide. He collapsed, in full view of the entire Cenari court. Aranaya turned, her name announced, a polite smile fixed on her face. She saw him fall. Time stopped. The court gasped. Dareth's eyes widened, first in confusion, then in triumph. The two Imperial sentinels at the door saw the heir's guest collapse. They saw the blood. They saw his non-Sinari, human features. They registered it as an attack, an assassination attempt. They raised their plasma pikes, the tips glowing with a deadly blue light, and advanced on Kale's unmoving body. "No!" Aranaya screamed. Her plan was in ruins. Her one ally was bleeding out. Her enemies were watching. The weak heir had failed. In that second, all the fear, all the repression, all the cold logic she had been taught, burned away. All that was left was the raw, protective instinct from the jungle. She moved. She did not run. She placed herself, a shield of silk and royal fury, directly between the advancing guards and Kale's body. "Stop!" she commanded. The guards hesitated, their programming conflicting. "Your Highness, step aside. Humans are a threat." "He is not a threat," Aranaya said, her voice shaking but rising with a power she had never known she possessed. The psychic echo, the storm she had been fighting, was no longer a weakness. It was a weapon. She drew on it. She drew on all of it. The pain, the rage, the fear, the desperate, impossible love. The guards raised their pikes again. "He is human. He is bleeding. He is not permitted." Aranaya looked at Dareth, who was smiling. She looked at the shocked court, and she made her choice. "He's mine!" she shouted. The words ripped from her throat, raw and possessive. And with them, her power. It exploded outward, not as a whisper, but as a visible wave of violet-blue energy. It was a psychic flare, a concussive blast of pure, unadulterated will. The pikes flew from the guards' hands. The nobles in the front row cried out, shielding their eyes. The crystal chandeliers vibrated. The entire court was frozen, stunned into silence, not by a logical argument, but by a raw, primal declaration. Aranaya stood in the center of the storm, breathing hard, her aura a visible flickering crown of fire. She had just declared in front of the entire empire that her allegiance was not to her people, not to her court, but to the bleeding human at her feet. The silence in the throne room lasted for 3 heartbeats. It was a suffocating, absolute vacuum, a void created by the princess's psychic blast and the sheer, unadulterated scandal of her words. Then the vacuum collapsed, and chaos erupted. The court did not whisper, it roared. Nobles scrambled back, some falling over one another, as if her psychic energy had been a physical blow. Shouts of treason and sacrilege, and she has been corrupted, echoed off the marble walls. The media drones, which had been broadcasting the ceremony live, swarmed in, their red recording lights a sudden rash of new eyes. Lord Dareth was the first to recover. His smile of triumph had vanished, replaced by a mask of cold, righteous fury. He seized the narrative. "Seize the human," he bellowed, pointing at Kale's bleeding, unconscious form. "He has used some human witchcraft on the heir. He has compromised the right of succession. Guards, protect the princess." It was a brilliant political move. He was not accusing Aranaya, but rescuing her. The Imperial sentinels, their pikes still shaking in their hands, advanced again. But Aranaya was not done. She stood over Kale's body, her psychic aura still a visible shimmering heat. "I said stop." She was no longer the weak heir. She was a woman on fire, but she was still outmaneuvered. Before she could speak again, a new, colder voice cut through the hall. "Enough!" Empress Virel had entered from a side passage. She had not been at the ceremony. It was tradition for the Empress to appear only at the end of the trials. But she was here now. The hall fell silent again. A new silence. This one filled with dread. Virel glided to the center of the room. She did not look at Kale. She did not look at Dareth. She looked only at her daughter, her eyes two chips of ice. "The right of succession is suspended," Virel declared, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "The Princess Aranaya is unwell. She is suffering from psychic instability, a tragic, unforeseen consequence of her sister's death." She was rewriting the event, live, in front of everyone. She was painting Aranaya as mad. "I am not mad," Aranaya said, her voice shaking with rage. "I am." "You are relieved," Virel interrupted, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that only Aranaya and the closest nobles could hear. "As of this moment, you are stripped of all political titles. You are no longer heir designate. You are no longer a member of the Imperial Council. You are a princess in name only, confined to your quarters until this instability passes." It was a political assassination, delivered in 2 sentences. "Medics," Virel commanded, turning to the court. "See to this person." She gestured at Kale with a flick of her hand, as if he were a piece of filth. "He is a diplomatic liability, a guest, as the princess claimed. He will be treated as such. Place him under full guard in the medical wing. He is not to be harmed. He is not to be spoken to. He is property of the crown, pending investigation." Aranaya tried to protest, but her mother's imperial sentinels had moved, forming a polite, impassive wall of steel between her and Kale. She was escorted from the throne room, her mother's words echoing behind her. "The court is dismissed." The scandal did not stay in the throne room. Within an hour, it was the only story in the galaxy. The press, fanned by Dareth's media machine, did not call her unstable. They called her Princess Corruption. Holograms in the public squares showed her face, frozen in its moment of psychic fury, next to Kale's bleeding, human form. "The human infection," one headline screamed. "Has the Cenari bloodline been compromised?" "He's mine," another quoted over and over, the words twisted from a declaration of protection into a primitive, lustful-sounding claim. "The heir's human pet." Rumors flew. He was a human super-soldier sent to assassinate the Empress. He was her off-world, degenerate lover. She had been consorting with him for months, her trip to the jungle a cover-up. She was a traitor, selling out the Empire for a primitive ape. The peace treaty with Earth, already fragile, began to crack under the strain. Kyle woke up in a room that was too white, too bright, and too soft. He was in a medical bed, his body floating on a field of anti-gravity. The pain was gone, replaced by the dull, fuzzy thrum of high-grade stabilizers. His wounds, old and new, were sealed. A glowing blue cuff was locked around his wrist. He was healed, and he was a prisoner. 2 Imperial sentinels stood at the room's only exit, motionless, their faces invisible behind their chrome helmets. He was clean, fed, and utterly powerless, a diplomatic liability, a pet in a sterile cage. Aranaya was in a different cage. Her quarters, the ones that had belonged to her sister, were now her prison. Her comms were cut. Her data slates were gone. Her handmaidens, including Alara, had been reassigned. She was alone. For 3 days, she saw no one. Then, her mother came. Virel entered without knocking. She stood in the center of the room, her posture immaculate. "You have had time to reflect on your hysteria." "It was not hysteria," Aranaya said. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the window, her fine robes rumpled. She felt hollowed out. "It was a spectacle. You have undone 1,000 years of diplomacy. You have made the Cenari line a laughingstock. You have made yourself a target. Dareth is formally challenging your right to the trials. The council is on his side. You have lost Aranaya. You lost it all for a creature. The coldness of it all, the sheer political calculation, finally broke Aranaya's shock. He has a name. He is Kale. He saved my life. His name is irrelevant. He is human. And what is so wrong with that? Aranaya cried, standing up. What are you so afraid of? That they are emotional? That they are chaotic? I felt his mind. Mother, he is more real, more honest, than anyone in this entire palace. I am afraid, Virel said, her voice dropping to a level of cold fury that Aranaya had never heard. Of impurity. I am afraid of a 5,000-year-old bloodline being contaminated by a primitive, warring species that we were foolish enough to grant a peace treaty. Contaminated? Is that what you think? You are a racist, a xenophobe. Virel slapped her. The sound was a sharp crack in the silent room. Aranaya's head snapped back, a red mark blooming on her lavender cheek. I am a realist, Virel said, her hand still raised. You want to know the truth? You want to know why I am so cold? Because my firstborn was murdered by a faction I was forced to tolerate, and my secondborn, my only remaining child, throws away an empire for a pet. I would rather see you dead, Aranaya, than mated to a human. A clean death is preferable to a corrupted bloodline. The words were colder than the slap. They were the end of any illusion of love. Aranaya saw her mother for what she was. A true believer in a system of pure, cold logic. A logic that saw anything different as a disease. Then you have already lost me, Aranaya whispered. Virel lowered her hand. The challenge from Dareth stands. The trial of heirs is a ceremony of combat. He is the finest duelist in the Empire. You will be dead in 5 minutes. Perhaps a clean death is what you deserve. The Empress turned and left. The door hissed shut, locking Aranaya back in her prison. That night, Aranaya found her way out. Her mother had taken her calms, but she had not taken her grief. She had not known that Terrell, her perfect sister, had also felt the need for secrets. Aranaya, in her mourning, had found a hidden panel in her sister's meditation chamber. It led to a network of old service tunnels, the same ones the Logos had shown Kale. Her mother had locked her in, but her sister from beyond the grave had given her the key. She found Kale's room. The guards were impassive, unmoving. She could not get past them, but she did not need to. She waited in the service tunnel that ran behind his sterile room. She pressed her hand against the wall, the same spot where, on the other side, his bed was located. She closed her eyes. She did not send a thought. She sent a feeling, the scent of the Xylos jungle, the sound of the Kralix roar. Kale sat up in his bed. The stabilizers had worn off. He was just bored and angry. He felt the wall behind him. It was cold, but then he felt something, a flicker, a psychic itch. He pressed his hand to the wall. He remembered the garden tower, her fear, her kiss. He sent back his own feelings, the smell of rust and despair from the Gehenna pits, the rage. A whisper echoed in his mind. Kyle. It was not a sound. It was her mind brushing his. I am here, she sent. He learned to wait for those moments in the dead of Syra's false night. She would come to the tunnel. They would sit with a wall of steel between them, and they would talk, not with words, with memories. He taught her what it was to be human. He shared the memory of his first childhood joke, a stupid pun that had made his brother Eli laugh until he cried. He shared the hollow, echoing sound of a human song, a lullaby his mother had sung, a simple melody that held more warmth than the entire imperial palace. In return, she opened her mind to him. She shared her loneliness. She showed him the memory of her sister, Terrell. Not the cold politician, but the older sister who would sneak her sweets, who would read her ancient Sinari myths of star sailors and forbidden love. She showed him the crushing weight of her mother's expectations, the ice-cold terror she felt. Their relationship deepened in that shared darkness, an intimacy of pure thought, of shared pain and broken pasts. He was no longer primitive to her. She was no longer a princess to him. They were just Kale and Aranaya. After a week, she found a way. A removable vent cover in her tunnel, shielded from sensors, that led to a maintenance space above his room. She dropped from the ceiling, landing silently on the sterile white floor, her face smudged with grease. Kale was on his feet in an instant, his heart leaping. She was real. She was here. He did not kiss her. He just held her, his arms wrapping around her, burying his face in her hair. She felt impossibly small and real. "He will kill you," Kyle rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "This trial of heirs, Dareth, he will kill you." "I know," she whispered against his chest. "But I have to fight. I cannot let him win." "This is not a fight. It is an execution. My plan is better. Escape." "What plan?" "I have been busy," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. He was not just a pet. He was a soldier. He had been observing. The guards changed every 6 hours. The blue cuff on his wrist was a biomonitor, not a tracker. The Logos AI, which had helped him once, had been subtly feeding him data through the room's environmental systems, flickers in the lights, patterns in the air circulation's hum, a quiet rebellion from the machine. "I have been in contact with Malix, the rebel leader," he said. "They are in the tunnels. They are ready." "How?" "The Logos. It is helping us. It is helping me. It sees Dareth as a threat to the entire system. Ilara is with them too. She's been coordinating us We have a window. Aranaya. Tomorrow night, during the height of the media frenzy for the trial, they will create a diversion. I get out. I will take you. We go to Ilara's ship. We run." She looked at him. It was the same choice as the Garden Tower, his life or her world. "I cannot," she said, her voice breaking. "Aranaya, he will kill you." Kyle gripped her shoulders. "You do not have to do this. This is not your fight. It is their corruption, stupid." He stopped. He saw the look in her eyes, the same steely resolve. "It is my fight," she said, "and I will not run." He stared at her, his anger warring with a new, terrifying respect. He had seen soldiers like this, the ones who stayed on the wall, who held the line, who knew they were going to die but did it anyway. He let go of her. "Then you are a fool." "No," she said, "I am the heir. He wants to expose me as weak, as a human lover. I will expose him as a murderer. I will bring the data slate to the trial. They will not let you, and it is a combat trial. Aranaya, not a debate. Then I will beat him." The words were so brave and so hopeless that it broke his heart. He pulled her to him, and this time he kissed her. It was not the desperate, angry kiss of the garden. It was slow and deep and full of a terrible, aching finality. It was a goodbye. They spent the night in her hidden meditation chamber, the one her sister had used. They had taken the tunnels, a princess and a fugitive, hiding in the palace's own shadows. It was a sensual, emotionally raw night. They did not talk of the trial. They did not talk of escape. They talked of the future they would never have. A small house on a quiet moon. A life where no one was a princess and no one was a soldier. They lay on the meditation mats, the alien moonlight streaming in. He touched the mark on her cheek where her mother had hit her. She traced the new silver scar on his shoulder where the plasma bolt had hit him. It was a night of shared comfort, of skin against skin, a desperate human need to feel alive, just one more time, before the end. They risked everything, not for politics, not for war, but for a few stolen hours of peace. As the first light of Syra's false dawn approached, the mood broke. The soldier returned. Kyle's plan was still in motion. He was still escaping, but he was no longer running. "This is madness," Aranaya said, her voice thick. "No," Dareth said, "and this is true." It was the morning of the trial, and Dareth had made his final move. He had gone public. He had not just disclosed the existence of the hybrid slave camps. He had broadcast their locations. He had twisted the narrative, claiming that he, Lord Dareth, had uncovered a plot by dissidents to pollute the Sinari Empire. And then he delivered the killing blow. This plot, Dareth's hologram boomed across the city, is championed by the corrupted Princess Aranaya herself. Her empathy for the impure human race, proven by her choice of pet, has blinded her. She supports these hybrids. She wants to see them freed. She wants to see them integrated. I say, we cleanse the empire. I say, we stand for a pure Sinari future. The empire did not just fracture. It shattered. Riots broke out. Hardliners attacked pro-peace advocates. The hybrid camps were besieged. The stock market crashed. Dareth had successfully turned Aranaya's compassion into a weapon against her. To be empathetic was now to be a traitor. Kyle watched the broadcast from his medical cell, his fists clenched. The diversion, the escape, it was all pointless now, even if they ran. Dareth had already won. He had inflamed the entire population. He would be crowned emperor by acclamation, and his first act would be to launch a fleet on Earth. The doors to his cell hissed open. It was not the guards. It was Ilara and Malix, dressed in stolen Sentinel armor. The Logos had triggered a full system-wide security fault. "It is time," Ilara said, throwing him a bundle of black rebel gear and a blaster. "The ship is waiting." Kyle looked at the gear. He looked at the broadcast, which was now showing the arena, filled with a bloodthirsty crowd. "No," Kale said. "What?" Malix snarled. "We are not leaving you." "I am not running," Kale said. He turned to Ilara. "Aranaya, she is still going to fight." "She is," Ilara said, her face grim. "She is walking to the arena now. She knows it is hopeless, but she will not back down." Keel's choice was made. In the garden, he had been the soldier trying to extract the asset. Now, he was a human, refusing to leave his partner. He would not run. He would not let her die alone. "We changed the plan," Kale said, his voice a low, hard command. "The escape is off. The fight is on. I am not getting her out. I am getting her through." He grabbed a heavy pack from Malix. "I need something different. Something a soldier would wear." He met her in the final tunnel before the arena entrance. She was in traditional white combat robes, her hair tied back. She was pale, her face a mask of doomed resolve. She was walking to her own execution. She stopped when she saw him. He was not in his white prisoner clothes. He was in the black, padded, functional gear of the rebel underground. He looked like a soldier from the jungle. "Kale," she breathed. "You should be gone. The diversion." "The plan changed," he said. He was holding a bulky, folded piece of black and gray metal. He held it out to her. It was a stolen soldier's exosuit, a light, tactical frame, designed for infiltration and close-quarters combat. "I cannot wear that," she whispered. "This is a ceremonial trial." "He is not planning a ceremony," Kyle said. "He is planning a murder. You know it. I know it." He stepped closer, forcing her to look him in the eyes. I will not let you die, Aranaya, but I will not let you run either. You were right. This is your fight, but you do not have to fight it alone. He touched her cheek, his hand rough, his eyes steady. I will be there, in the shadows. I will be watching. He makes one move, one wrong step. I take him down. But you have to fight. Aranaya, you have to fight like you did in the jungle. You have to fight like a human, full of rage and chaos and a desperate need to live. He helped her strap the light armor on, hidden beneath the folds of her white robes. It was a profane human thing, a piece of war technology hidden under a sacred garment. He gave her the data slate with Dareth's confession. When you win, he said, not if. Show them this. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. If you fall, he promised, his voice a raw, iron vow, I will fall with you. He then slipped back into the shadows, a ghost in the machine, leaving her to face the roar of the crowd. The Imperial Arena on Syra was a coliseum of ancient gray stone and modern unforgiving glass. It was built to hold 200,000 souls, a place for executions, and once every century, the trial of heirs. Today, it was full. Millions more watched on the galactic feed, a vast, angry audience hungry for a resolution. When Aranaya walked onto the sand, her white ceremonial robes a stark, lonely target against the rust-colored ground, the sound was not a cheer. It was a roar of derision. Traitor, a voice screamed from the stands. Human lover, another shrieked. The crowd, inflamed by Dareth's propaganda, pelted the arena floor with refuse. She did not flinch. She kept walking to the center, her face a mask of cold, regal calm. Beneath the white silk, the light, stolen exosuit Kale had given her felt like a cold, secret promise. High above, in the steel and shadow labyrinth of the gantries. Kale watched. He was a ghost in the machine, his black rebel gear a perfect camouflage. He had a clear line of sight, a stolen plasma rifle steady in his hands. But he was already in trouble. Getting to this position has not been easy. He had encountered 2 of Dareth's personal guards in a service tunnel, men who were not wearing the Imperial Sentinel chrome but Dareth's own black and silver. They were not here to keep the peace. They were here to ensure a specific outcome. Kale had been forced to kill them, quietly, but not before one had grazed him, a glancing plasma burn that had torn open the new scar on his side. He was bleeding, again. He pressed a field dressing against the wound, hissing as he watched Aranaya take her place. Dareth was already on the sand. He wore no helmet, his arrogant, handsome face open for the cameras to adore. His armor was a deep, burnished black, a stark contrast to her white. He was not alone. As the outline stated, this was a trial for all claimants. 2 other nobles, hardline allies of Dareth, stood with him, their own ceremonial blades drawn. It was not a trial. It was a public execution, sanctioned by law. The trial of heirs begins, the Chamberlain announced, his voice booming over the arena. A challenge of combat, mind and spirit, to yield or to die. Let the claimants for the throne of Syra proceed. The 2 allied nobles did not wait. They charged Aranaya at once, their blades high, a coordinated flanking maneuver. The crowd roared, expecting a death in seconds. Dareth watched, his arms crossed, a smirk on his lips. This was the opening act. Aranaya did not move. She waited. Kyle watched, his finger tightening on the trigger. Not yet. Let them see you. She let them come. She let them get so close they could see the fear in her eyes. Then she vanished. The first claimant, a heavy brute of a man, swung his blade at air. Aranaya had used the precise fluid Sinari footwork to pivot, but she finished the move with a brutal human strike Kyle had taught her in the jungle ruins. She drove her reinforced elbow, backed by the power of the hidden exosuit, into the side of the man's neck. He collapsed, his armor clattering, unconscious before he hit the sand. One down. The second, faster. Claimant adjusted, thrusting his blade at her chest. This time, Aranaya's hand shot out. She did not block the blade. She used her psychic gift, her mind, so long a source of instability, now a precision weapon. She felt his intent, the microscopic tensing of his shoulder, and she moved before he did. She caught his wrist, her fingers locking on with augmented strength. She twisted, using his own momentum against him, a move Kale had drilled into her. There was a sickening snap of bone. The noble screamed, his weapon clattering to the sand, 2 down. The entire exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. The arena, which had been roaring, fell into a stunned, deep silence. Dareth's smirk was gone. He had not expected the weak, empathetic princess to fight like a veteran from the Gehenna pits. "It seems," Aranaya said, her voice clear and carrying in the new silence, "that you will have to do this yourself, Dareth." Dareth unsheathed his own weapon, a heavy, energized blade. "You have been practicing, little princess. That human taught you his animal tricks." "He taught me to survive," Aranaya said. "A lesson I will now unteach." He attacked. If the other two were brawlers, Dareth was a master. He was all power, speed, and precision. He rained blows down on her, the black blade clashing against the hidden, armored plates of her suit. Sparks flew. The sound of the impacts was deafening. Aranaya was driven back. She was strong, but he was stronger. She was fast, but he was relentless. He was a duelist. She was a survivor. He was fighting to win. She was fighting to live. "You are just delaying the inevitable," Dareth roared, his blade locking with hers. He forced her down to one knee. "You are just like your sister, too soft, too weak. You should not have said her name," Aranaya snarled. She used her gift, not as a subtle push, but as a mental strike. She poured all her rage, her grief, her memory of his voice on the data slate, into a single psychic spike aimed at his mind. Dareth roared, staggering back, his hand flying to his temple. He had not expected a telepathic assault. In the gantries, Kale saw it too. He also saw Dareth's hand slip inside his armor, touching a comm unit. Dareth was done playing. The trial had failed. He was calling in the coup. "Aranaya, move!" Kyle yelled, but his voice was lost in the vastness. Dareth recovered, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. "You broke the rules, witch! You will die!" He lunged, but at that exact moment, the real attack began. From the audience, in the high, expensive seats reserved for the noble houses, 6 men in Dareth's black and silver guard uniforms stood. They raised plasma rifles. They did not fire at Aranaya. They fired at the Imperial sentinels who were guarding the Empress's empty throne. The chrome-plated guards fell, their polished armor smoking. The crowd screamed, a new sound, a sound of genuine terror. This was not a trial, when this was a coup. Assassins who had been hidden among the crowd began to flood the exits, sealing the arena. Down on the sand, Dareth stopped his attack, a look of triumph on his face. "It is over, princess. The era of your weak, empathetic line is done." "No!" a new voice growled. Kyle did not leap from the gantry. He was too far, too high, too wounded. He did what a soldier would do. He ran, half falling, down the service stairs, his side screaming in protest. He burst through a maintenance door at sand level, his plasma rifle raised. He was bleeding badly, the black rebel gear dark and slick with his own blood. He looked like a phantom, a demon of war. He opened fire, not at Dareth, but at the two assassins nearest to Aranaya. Two clean shots. Two bodies dropped. He sprinted, covering the 50 yards of sand in a few seconds, and threw himself between Aranaya and Dareth, his rifle aimed at the noble's chest. They were back to back. The bleeding human fugitive and the white-robed princess. The arena was in full-blown panic. Dareth's men were on the sand, surrounding them. Kyle and Aranaya were an island in a sea of enemies. "You should have stayed on your ship, human," Dareth snarled, signaling his men to hold. He wanted this moment. "I promised her I would be here." Kyle panted, the blood loss making him dizzy. He would not fall. He would not. Aranaya looked at Kyle. He was here. He was bleeding for her. He had kept his promise. All her fear, all her logic, all her political maneuvering, it all melted away, replaced by a single, undeniable, ferocious truth. She turned to Dareth, who was preparing for the final killing charge. "He's mine!" The shout was the same one from the throne room, but it was not a plea. It was not a claim. It was a fact. It was a war cry. It was the defining statement of her reign. She grabbed the front of Kale's tactical vest, pulling his bleeding, exhausted body toward her. She looked him in the eyes, and she kissed him. It was not the desperate, pained kiss of the garden tower. It was not the sensual, stolen goodbye of the meditation chamber. This was a kiss of pure, unbridled defiance. She kissed him in front of her people, in front of the assassins, in front of the entire galaxy. She was not the corrupted princess. She was the woman who had chosen, and as their lips met, her power, anchored by his human chaos, fueled by her own righteous fury, detonated. It was not a sound. It was a wave, a massive, visible, shimmering dome of violet-blue psychic energy. It erupted from her, a silent, concussive blast that swept across the arena. The assassins, their rifles raised, stopped, their hands unclenched, their eyes rolled back. They did not die. Their nervous systems were simply and completely shut down. They collapsed, a dozen men falling like puppets with their strings cut. The wave washed over Dareth. He cried out, a high, thin sound, as the psychic energy tore his mental defenses apart. His energized blade hissed and died, falling from his numb fingers. The wave hit the stands, the crowd, the nobles, the guards, all of it. They were frozen, not in terror, but in pure, unadulterated awe. The universe had held its breath. In the silence that followed, Aranaya pulled back from the kiss. She was breathing hard, her psychic aura a visible, flickering crown of light. Kale was staring at her, his exhaustion forgotten, a look of stunned reverence on his face. "Wow," he whispered. The silence was broken by a single sound, a thud. An old, high-ranking noble, one who had served her grandfather, had fallen from his seat, not dead. He had fallen to his knees. He was staring at Aranaya, his eyes wide with a fear that was indistinguishable from worship. Then another noble knelt, and another. In the royal box, in the stands across the arena, hundreds of Sinari, the most logical, order-obsessed people in the galaxy, were kneeling. They were not kneeling to a princess. They were kneeling to a god. Dareth was on his knees, drooling, his mind shattered by the psychic blast. Aranaya walked toward him, Kale a step behind her, his rifle now steady. "Lord Dareth," Aranaya said, her voice amplified by the arena's emergency system, which the Logos AI had just cleared. "You are accused of sedition, of high treason, and of the assassination of the heir designate Terrell." She pulled the data slate from beneath her robes. She held it up. "A crime," she said, her voice full of ice, "for which I have proof." She clicked the slate. Dareth's own voice, cold and clear, echoed through the stunned arena. Remove her. The secondary air is weak. She will be controlled. A galaxy-wide gasp. The truth, undeniable. The penalty for high treason is death, Aranaya declared. The sentence is immediate. Imperial sentinels, take him. The loyal sentinels, the ones Dareth had not managed to kill, marched onto the sand and seized the broken noble, dragging him away. Aranaya turned, her victory complete. And then she saw her mother. Empress Virel was standing in the royal baka and she had not knelt. She was staring at Aranaya, her face an unreadable mask of ice. For a moment, their eyes met. Aranaya saw no pride, no fear. She saw nothing. Then, Virel turned, her back rigid, and walked, not ran, out of the royal box. She did not look back. By the time the guards reached her chambers, she was gone. The Empress had vanished from the palace, presumed fled. The throne was Aranaya's. A new problem. Kyle. He was still a human, still a fugitive, still bleeding on the sacred arena sand. The old noble who had knelt first, the minister, approached. "Your Imperial Highness," he said, his voice trembling. "The trial is concluded. You are Empress. What? What is to be done with humans? By law, for his interference, he must be offered exile or execution." Aranaya looked at Kyle. He gave her a bloody, tired smirk. He was ready for either. "He is not to be exiled," Aranaya said, "and he is not to be executed." She looked at the minister, her crown of psychic fire still burning low. "He is the imperial consort. He is my partner. He will be my husband. His word is my word. His house is my house. You will address him as you address me." The minister's jaw dropped. The court, which had just begun to stand, was frozen in a new kind of shock. Before the minister could argue, before a new riot could break out, the arena's massive screens, the public broadcast, every screen in the city lit up with the glowing blue rune of the Logos. The voice of 1,000 chimes filled the world. The trial is complete. The logic is reborn. A new era begins. The Cenari Ascension. The AI's voice was not just a report, it was a prophecy. The old logic was flawed. It demanded purity. It led to stagnation and secrets. The new logic is the bond. The blood is no longer pure. It is bonded. A royal soul bonded with a human soul. The fracture is the key. The ascension is here. The AI, the central god of the Cenari people, had just declared Aranaya's scandalous, impossible act a sacred evolution. Aranaya finally let her power recede. She turned to Kale. He was swaying, the adrenaline gone, the blood loss critical. Medics, who had been too terrified to move, now rushed the field. Kale waved them off. Just for a second, he saw one of the media drones, now back online, hovering near him. He stumbled toward it, pushing past the medics. He had one more promise to keep. He looked directly into the camera. His face was streaked with grime, sweat, and his own blood. He was not a prince. He was not a hero. He was just a man. He was speaking to the rebels in the tunnels, to the hybrids in the camps, to his old comrades on Earth, to a galaxy that thought he was a monster. "My name is Kale," he said, his voice a raw human rasp. "I am a human. For weeks," he panted, "you have been told I am a corruption, an impurity. They told you I had a disease. They used me to make you hate. They told you the same lies about your children, about your brothers, about your neighbors, just because they were different." He wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. Dareth was a murderer, but he did not have the disease. The disease is a lie. The lie that pure is strong. The lie that different is weak. He gestured, his hand shaking toward Aranaya, who was watching him, her heart in her eyes. your new empress. She did not fight for purity. She fought for the truth, and she fought for me. He leaned in, his eyes burning with a soldier's fire. The rebellion you wanted, the one against corruption, it is here. It just started. It is not a fight against the throne. It is a fight against hate. So stand up, and fight with us. He finished, his duty done. The world finally went gray. He collapsed into the arms of the medics, his raw, simple human speech sparking a fire across the stars, a rebellion of the heart. The rebuilding of the imperial palace was not a restoration, but a transformation. The cold, sterile glass and steel, relics of Virel's rigid logic, were replaced, under Aranaya's direction, and with Kale's blunt, human practicality. The palace opened, walls came down, courtyards were planted with Xylo's jungle flora, a reminder of where their new era had begun. The throne room, its floors still stained by the arena's sand and Kale's blood, was not scrubbed and hidden. It was left as a monument, a reminder that the new Cenari ascension was born not from purity but from a fight. Kale, as imperial consort, sat in the high council chambers. He wore no robes, just his black functional human clothing. He was a stark, chaotic blot of black in a sea of Cenari silver. The nobles, the ones who had not fled with Virel, had learned to tolerate his presence. His speech at the arena had ignited the galaxy's underclasses. To harm him was to invite revolution. Aranaya's first act as empress, with Kale standing at her side, was not a decree of vengeance. It was a decree of liberation. Together, they traveled to the hybrid slave camps that Dareth had used to ignite a holy war. The local militias, terrified of the new human consort and the Star Empress, had already fled. Kale walked to the gates of the first camp. The half-human, half-Cenari prisoners cowered in the back of their cages, seeing a human dressed in black, flanked by Imperial sentinels. They saw a new monster. Aranaya stopped at the gate. She looked at Kyle. "This is not my act to perform," she said, her voice quiet. "It is yours." Kyle looked at her, understanding. He walked to the main locking console. He did not use a key. He did not wait for a code. He raised his heavy human-made boot and kicked the panel. It sparked, hissed, and the locks on 100 cages disengaged with a pneumatic sigh. He walked to the first cage, where the young woman he had saved in the Undercity was clutching her child. He did not offer his hand. He just stepped aside. "You are free," he said, his voice rough. "No one is your master. The Empress has declared you full citizens of the Cenari Empire, with all rights and protections. There are ships waiting to take you home, wherever that may be." They dismantled Dareth's systems of oppression piece by piece, the secret funds, the hidden labor colonies, the xenophobic purity laws woven into the Imperial Charter. Kale was the hammer, smashing through protocol and demanding simple, direct answers. Aranaya was the light, using her psychic gift not as a weapon but as a bridge. She could feel the court's fear, their resentment, their buried hopes. She navigated the political maze while Kale kept the path clear. But the galaxy is larger than one empire. The old guard did not approve. Tensions rose from the other star systems. The Praxian hegemony, a rigid caste-based reptilian race, severed diplomatic ties. Their ancient scaled ambassador, in a final galaxy-wide broadcast, spat at a hologram of Kale. "The Cenari Empire has fallen," the ambassador hissed. "It is ruled by a chaotic primitive and a psychic abomination. Their ascension is a disease. The hegemony and its allies will not recognize this bond with the human filth from Earth. Any movement of Cenari ships into Earth example space will be considered an act of war." The old council members looked at Aranaya, their faces pale. This was the test. Aranaya stood, her hands clasped behind her back. Kyle watched her, a silent shadow at her side. "The Praxian ambassador is correct about one thing," Aranaya said, her voice clear and cold, filling the chamber. "The old Sinari Empire has fallen. The new one stands in its place." She looked directly at the Praxian ambassador's lingering frozen image. The Sinari Empire no longer recognizes the definition of purity as a valid diplomatic term. We are a bonded empire, and our bond with Earth is absolute. So let me be clear, any act of war declared against Earth is an act of war declared against this throne. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "And we," she concluded, her eyes flickering with that violet light, "will answer together." The hegemony backed down. The galaxy watched and waited. 2 months later, a small, unmarked smuggler's ship dropped out of hyperspace in a quiet sector of the Sol system. It was Alara's old ship, the one Kyle had escaped Gehenna on. Kyle was at the controls. He was dressed in worn civilian clothes, the same ones he had been wearing when he crashed on Xylos. Aranaya sat in the co-pilot's chair, her hair hidden beneath a simple hood. "Nervous?" he asked. "I am about to meet the people my father tried to exterminate," she said, her voice a whisper. "I am terrified. They should hate me." "They probably will," Kyle said with a grim honesty. "Let's start there." He landed the ship in a canyon in the North American desert, a place of red rock and vast open skies. He had an old pre-war motorcycle hidden in the cargo hold. They rode it 200 kilometers to a small, dusty town huddled on the edge of what had once been a great lake. This was a veterans' town, a place for the broken soldiers of the Meridian campaign to forget the war. Kyle parked the bike. He looked at Aranaya. "Stay here for a minute. Let me go first. And try not to read anyone's mind. The thoughts in this place are heavy." He walked into the only bar, a place called The Last Stand. The door creaked. The music stopped. A dozen men and women, all scarred in ways both visible and not, looked up from their drinks. A man with a prosthetic arm and a scarred face squinted through the gloom. "Kale, my God, we thought you were dead. We heard you were captured." "I got loose," Kale said. The scarred man, his old sergeant, looked past him, at the door, where Aranaya was now standing, unable to wait. Her lavender skin and winter sky eyes were unmistakable. The sergeant's good hand went to the blaster on his hip. "Kale, what is that? What is Sinari doing here?" "She's with me, Jax," Kale said, his voice level. "She's my wife." The bar was so silent, Kale could hear the dust settling. "You married one of them?" Jax snarled. "After what they did? After Eli?" "She is not them, Jax. She is the one who stopped them." It was a long, tense, angry conversation. It was a reunion filled with accusations, with grief, with old, unhealed wounds. But Kale held his ground, and Aranaya. She did not defend herself. She just listened. She walked out of the bar, leaving Kale to drink with his ghosts. She walked to the center of the small town. There was a monument, a single black stone obelisk. It was a list of names, the dead from this one. Small town, all lost in her father's war. She read them, her fingers tracing the carved letters. She felt the echo of the pain, the ripples of loss that had defined Kay Good's entire species. Kale found her there an hour later. The sun was setting, turning the red rocks to fire. "Your people did this," he said. It was not an accusation, and it was a simple, heartbreaking fact. "Yes," Aranaya whispered, her eyes shining with tears she would not let fall. "And I have seen my father's war reports. I know what he did to Meridian. But to see this, the names, it's okay, Ara," he said, his voice gentle. "No," she said, turning to him, her eyes fierce. "It is not. But I promise you, Kale, it will never happen again." He put his arm around her. For the first time, the Empress of Syra stood on the soil of the world her people had tried to destroy, and she felt the true weight of her crown. They returned to Syra. Their bond deepened, their resolve hardened. But the old guard was not gone. It was just hiding. The attack came 3 weeks later. It was not a bomb. It was not a public coup. It was a knife in the dark. They were walking in the garden tower, their one true sanctuary, watching the twin moons rise. Kale was telling her about a ridiculous human movie he had made the Logos AI find for him. A guard stepped from the shadows, a member of the Imperial Sentinels, one who had served her mother for 20 years. "Your Highness," he said, bowing. "Captain Thalos," Aranaya said, smiling. "A beautiful night." "Indeed, Your Highness," Thalos said, and he lunged. He was not aiming for Aranaya. He was aiming for Kale. "For the purity of the bloodline," he screamed. Kale was a soldier. His instincts were supernatural. He had already moved, shoving Aranaya behind him. He had his hand up, deflecting the blow. But Thalos was not a fool. He was not using a simple knife. He was wearing a vibro-blade gauntlet. The energy blade sliced through Kale's defenses and plunged deep into his side, the same side that had been wounded in the crash. Kale cried out, a sharp, terrible sound. He stumbled back, his hand clutching the smoking wound. Aranaya screamed. Her psychic power lashed out, and Captain Thalos was thrown across the garden, his body slamming into a stone wall, his armor cracking like an eggshell. Kale collapsed. "Guards!" Aranaya shrieked, rushing to him. "Medics, now!" Kale was gasping, his face pale, his blood dark and human, pooling on the alien stone. He got me good. Ara," he panted. "Do not talk," she ordered, pressing her hands to the wound. "You are fine. You are fine." The medics arrived in seconds. They got him on a repulsor stretcher, rushing him to the medical bay. But it was already too late. "Your Majesty," the chief medical officer said, his face grim. "The blade was poisoned. A fast-acting neurotoxin. It's designed for Sinari biology. In his human blood, we cannot stop it. His heart is failing. He has minutes." Aranaya looked at the readouts. She saw the lines flattening. She saw the man she loved, the man who had crossed galaxies for her, dying. She remembered the myths, the ancient, forbidden Sinari legends she had shared with him in the dark. The soul merge. An act so forbidden it was considered madness. A psychic merging so total that two minds became one. It was said to heal any wound at the cost of both souls. "Get out," she whispered. "Your Majesty?" the doctor asked. "Get out!" she roared, her psychic voice throwing the doors of the medical bay wide. "Leave us!" The medical team fled. She was alone with him. Kale's eyes were fluttering. "Ara, it's okay. We won. You are not allowed to die," she said, her voice a low, iron growl. She climbed onto the medical bed. She straddled his hips. She placed her hands on his chest, directly over his heart. "What are you doing?" he rasped. "Saving you, you idiot," she whispered. She closed her eyes. She did not reach out with her mind. She reached out with her soul. She plunged past the barriers of his consciousness, past the pain, past the memories of Meridian and Gehenna. She found the core of him, the Kale he had been before the war, the Kale who loved her. And she poured her own life, her own psychic energy, her own self into him. It was not a gentle merging, it was a vortex, a psychic storm. The room lit up with a violet fire, brighter than the arena, brighter than the sun. She felt everything. His childhood, the death of his brother, Eli, the agonizing pain of the gladiator pits, his overwhelming, all-consuming love for her. And he felt her cold, lonely childhood, the suffocating pressure of her mother, the terror in the jungle, the desperate, hopeless kiss in the garden tower. It was madness. It was a fusion. It was two souls being torn apart and reformed as one. She pushed her life force into his dying cells, burning out the poison with her own psychic fire. She held on, even as the storm threatened to annihilate her own sanity. Then, as the light reached a blinding, impossible peak, it stopped. The room was dark. Kyle was still. Aranaya collapsed on his chest, her energy gone, her mind shattered. He recovered slowly. He woke, 3 days later, not in the medical bay, but in her bed. The wound was gone, healed over by new pale skin. He was weak, but he was alive, and he was all different. He sat up, and he felt her. She was not in the room. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that she was in a council meeting, 2 floors down. He could feel her. He could feel her frustration at a trade minister, her faint background worry about him, and a deep, ocean-sized well of love. He smiled. "I hear you," he whispered, across the palace, in the middle of a complex trade dispute. Aranaya stopped, her hand going to her heart. She had heard him, not as a voice, but as a thought, a feeling, a warmth in her soul. The merging had not just saved him, it had permanently connected them. They were 2 bodies, but they were one mind. They could feel each other's emotions, share thoughts, sense dangers, even across the vastness of space. The forbidden act, the act of madness, had been their final ascension. Their love became a legend. It was the story that ended the galactic tensions, the Praxian hegemony, faced with a power they could not understand, a love so strong it defied death and physics, reopened talks. The bonded Empress and her human soul were no longer seen as a weakness. They were a new, terrifying, and beautiful kind of strength. Songs were written, epic poems were composed, children, both human and Sinari and a dozen other species, dreamed of crossing the stars, not for war, but for a love that could merge 2 souls. In the final scene, years later, Kale stood on the balcony of the garden tower. The city, their city, spread out below, a tapestry of light and life. He wore the simple black robes of a consort, but he moved with the peace of a king. The wars were over. The past was healed. He watched the alien sun rise, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. He felt her before he saw her. She came up behind him, sliding her arms around his waist. He leaned back against her. Aranaya wrapped her hand over his, placing it on his chest, directly over his heart. Her hand, as it always did when she was near him, glowed with a soft, violet psychic light. "You're not just mine," she whispered, her voice a soft murmur in his mind and in his ear at the same time. "I'm yours too." He turned in her embrace, his hand coming up to cup her face. He answered with a kiss, slow and deep, and full of a peace that had been earned 1,000 times over. It was not a kiss of desperation or of defiance, but of simple, profound, and permanent belonging. They stood there for a long moment, 2 rulers, 1 heart. Then he took her hand, the one that was still glowing. "They are waiting for us in the council chamber," he said. "Then let's not keep them waiting," she replied. And together they walked, side by side, out of the garden and toward the future they had built.